The Mafia Boss never admitted his feelings for his maid, until she started coming home late. "I don't pay you to watch the clock, Marlowe. I pay you to be invisible. And I don't charge you for my silence, Mr. Fairborn. That comes free." She was the only variable he couldn't calculate. He was the king of the city's underworld, a man who dealt in absolutes and death. She was just the maid who polished the silver and ironed the blood out of his shirts. But when the clock struck midnight and the penthouse remained empty, Archer Fairborn realized that owning the city meant nothing if he didn't own her time. What happens when a cold-blooded killer realizes his prey has walked into a trap he didn't set? Sit back, subscribe, and let's unravel the mystery of the Mafia Boss never admitted his feelings for his maid until she started coming home late. The penthouse did not tolerate imperfection. It was a glass box suspended 60 stories above the city, a vacuum of white marble, black steel, and silence. Archer Fairborn liked it that way. The air was filtered, cool, and scentless. The city below, a sprawling, gridlocked mess of neon and grime, was something to be ruled, not experienced. Archer stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of the skyline. He was 32, built like a weapon kept in a velvet case, all sharp angles and tailored Italian wool. He checked his watch. A Patek Philippe, accurate to the nanosecond. 10:07 p.m. She was 7 minutes late. Marlowe Drake had worked for him for 11 months. In that time, she had been a ghost. She moved through the expansive apartment with a quiet efficiency that bordered on supernatural. She knew how to clean a gun without asking why it had been fired. She knew how to bandage a knife wound without flinching. She knew that coffee was to be served at 6 a.m., black, and that she was to leave by 10 p.m., unseen, unheard. 7 minutes was not an error. It was a deviation. And Archer Fairborn did not survive the brutal succession wars of the syndicate by ignoring deviations. He turned from the window, his footsteps silent on the marble. He poured a drink, amber liquid, older than the building he stood in, and waited. He shouldn't care. Staff were replaceable. If she was late, he should fire her. If she was compromised, he should eliminate her. Those were the rules. But as the digital clock flickered to 10:12 p.m., the sensation in his chest wasn't the cold pragmatism of a boss. It was a hot, jagged wire of irritation. Panic. No, Archer didn't feel panic. He felt territory infringement. The elevator chimed, a soft, deferential sound that echoed too loudly in the stillness. The door slid open. Marlowe stepped out. She looked different. Usually, her uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that tightened the skin around her eyes. Tonight, a stray lock of dark hair had escaped, curling against her jaw. Her coat was buttoned wrong, and she was breathing hard, as if she had run the last few blocks. Archer took a sip of his drink, his eyes narrowing. He didn't speak. He let the silence stretch, a heavy, suffocating weight. Marlowe stopped in the foyer. She didn't look at him. She moved toward the closet to hang up her coat, her movements jerky. "You're late," Archer said. His voice was a low rumble, smooth but laced with gravel. Marlowe froze. She kept her back to him, her hand hovering over a hanger. "Traffic, Mr. Fairborn. The bridge was backed up. The bridge is clear. I have a live feed of the traffic grid on my tablet." Marlowe's shoulders stiffened. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, her large, expressive eyes darting away from his gaze. She was 24, with a face that usually held a stoic, almost bored expression. Tonight, she looked electric, wired. "I had to take a detour," she said, her voice steady but lacking its usual conviction. "It won't happen again." Archer walked toward her. He moved like a predator, slow and deliberate. He stopped 2 feet away, invading her personal space. He could smell the city on her, not just the exhaust and the wind, but something else. Stale beer, cheap menthol cigarettes, and underneath that, fear. "Where were you, Marlowe?" "I told you a detour." "You smell like the docks," Archer observed, tilting his head. "You live in Kensington. The docks are 5 miles in the opposite direction." Marlowe's chin tilted up. It was a small defiance, one he hadn't seen before. My personal time is my own, sir. As long as the work is done, my route home shouldn't concern you. Everything concerns me, Archer snapped, the glass in his hand tightening. Especially when the person responsible for the hygiene of my sanctuary comes in smelling like a rigger's bar. I'll shower before I start tomorrow, she said dismissively, turning back to the closet. Archer reached out, his hand closing over her wrist. It was an impulse, a breach of the unspoken contract between them. He never touched the help. Her skin was cold. Her pulse was hammering against his fingertips like a trapped bird. Let go, she whispered, not a plea, a command. Archer stared at her. For the first time, he really saw her, not as a function of the house, but as a woman. A woman with secrets. A woman who was trembling, not from the cold, but from adrenaline. You're shaking, he noted. I'm tired, Mr. Fairborn. You're lying. He pulled her wrist slightly closer, inspecting her sleeve. There, barely visible against the dark wool of her coat, was a smear. It was small, reddish-brown, and drying. Blood. Archer's eyes went flat. The romantic tension, if that's what the heat in his gut was, vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of the dawn. Is that yours? He asked, his voice dropping an octave. Marlowe yanked her arm back, breaking his grip. She hid the hand behind her back. I cut myself on a jagged railing. It's nothing. Marlowe. Good night, Mr. Fairborn. She turned and walked briskly toward the servants' quarters, a small annex off the kitchen. She didn't run, but the urgency was there. She closed the door, and the click of the lock was the loudest sound in the room. Archer stood in the foyer, the scent of the docks lingering in the sterile air. He finished his drink in one swallow. She wasn't just late, she was involved. And Archer Fairborn did not allow his things to be involved in messiness he didn't orchestrate. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number that didn't have a name saved to it. It's me, Archer said. I need a full surveillance package on Marlowe Drake. Where she goes, who she speaks to, what she eats. Start tonight. He hung up, looking at the closed door of her room. The game had changed. He just wasn't sure if she was a player or a pawn. 3 days passed. The tension in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. Marlowe continued her duties with robotic precision, but the air between them had shifted. It was charged, volatile. Archer found himself working from the penthouse more often, his laptop open on the mahogany dining table, ignoring the multi-million-dollar deals scrolling across his screen to watch her. He watched how she polished the banisters, how she arranged the flowers. He was looking for a tell, a wire, a phone. He had received the preliminary report from his security team. It was frustratingly clean. Marlowe Drake, orphaned at 16, scholarship student, dropped out of university 2 years ago due to financial strain. No criminal record, no known associates in the life. So why was she coming home at 11 p.m., then midnight, then 1 a.m.? It was Tuesday. Archer was sitting in the library, a book unread in his lap. Marlowe was dusting the shelves. The rhythmic swish-swish of the feather duster was hypnotic. You're bleeding again, Archer said. Marlowe stopped. She looked at her hand. A fresh bandage was wrapped around her knuckles. Kitchen accident, she said, not looking at him. The ceramic knife? You're clumsy lately, Archer drawled, standing up. Or maybe you're distracted. Maybe I'm just tired of being watched, she shot back. The audacity of it made Archer smile. A shark smile. He walked over to her, taking the duster from her hand and setting it on the table. I watch because I protect my interests, Marlowe. I am an employee, not an asset. In my world, everyone is an asset, or a liability. He leaned in close, his height dwarfing her. Which one are you becoming? Marlowe met his gaze. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with gold, and currently burning with a strange mixture of anger and guilt. I need the night off tomorrow, she said abruptly. Archer blinked. Excuse me. Wednesday night I need to leave at 6. No, it wasn't a question, Mr. Fairborn. I have an appointment. Cancel it. I can't. Why? A date? The word tasted like acid in his mouth. The thought of Marlowe, dressed up, smiling at some mediocre accountant or mechanic, made his hand twitch toward the hidden holster at the small of his back. It was an irrational, possessive rage that he couldn't justify. "It's personal," she said. "If you leave at 6, don't come back." It was a bluff. They both knew it. Marlo stared at him, searching his face. Then she did something unexpected. She sighed, a sound of heavy defeat, and reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small green notebook. It was tattered, the spine broken, the pages dog-eared. "If I leave this here," she said quietly, "will you trust that I'm coming back?" Archer looked at the notebook. "What is it?" "Collateral." She placed it on the library table. "Don't open it. Please. Just hold it. It's the only thing of value I have." She turned and walked out of the library, leaving Archer alone with the green notebook. For an hour, he stared at it. The code of the street said, "Information is power." Open the book. The code of a gentleman, which he pretended to be when it suited him, said to respect her privacy. Archer Fairborn was not a gentleman. He picked up the notebook. It smelled like her, vanilla and soap. He opened it. He expected a diary. He expected teenage poetry or a grocery list. What he found made his blood run cold. It was math. Complex, chaotic, beautiful mathematics. Pages and pages of algorithms, probability curves, and predictive modeling. But it wasn't abstract. Table 4. Dealer. Lefty. Shuffle pattern. 3 riffle 1 strip. Variance. 4.2%. The Cobalt Room. Entry fee. 50,000. Win limit before detection. 200,000. Archer flipped the pages faster. It was a card-counting ledger. But not just card-counting. She was mapping the entire illegal gambling circuit of the city. His city. And not just his casinos. She had data on the underground games run by the Triads, the Russians, and the Independents. She wasn't seeing a boyfriend. She was gambling. No. Archer looked closer at the margins. Debt remaining, 140,000. Due date, Friday. She wasn't gambling for the thrill. She was playing for her life. Archer slammed the book shut. The appointment, tomorrow night. She was going to the Iron Horse. He knew it because he owned the building, though the game in the basement was run by a rival faction he was currently in a ceasefire with, the Vipers. The Vipers didn't play nice. If they caught a counter, they didn't ban them. They broke their hands. Or worse. Marlo wasn't just coming home late. She was walking into a slaughterhouse. Wednesday night. The air was thick with fog, the city lights diffusing into a sickly orange glow. Marlo left the penthouse at 6 p.m. sharp. She wore a nondescript gray hoodie and jeans, her hair tucked under a beanie. She looked like a student or a nobody. She took the subway 3 stops, then switched to a bus, then walked 6 blocks. Her tradecraft was amateur, but her determination was terrifying. Archer followed in the black Wraith, keeping 2 blocks back. He had dismissed his driver. This was something he had to handle personally. He watched as she ducked into an alleyway behind a dilapidated meatpacking plant in the industrial district. The sign above the rusted door flickered. Iron Horse Logistics. Archer parked the car in the shadows. He checked his sidearm, a suppressed Walther PPK. He stepped out into the damp air. He moved through the alley, stepping over trash and puddles of questionable liquid. He could hear the thrum of bass from inside the building. He reached the door just as 2 bouncers, slabs of muscle with neck tattoos, stepped out to smoke. Archer didn't slow down. He walked right up to them. "Closed private party, pal." The larger one grunted. Archer didn't speak. He moved with a blur of violence. A palm strike to the chin of the first man, shattering the jaw. A swift kick to the knee of the second, followed by an elbow to the temple. 3 seconds, 2 bodies on the ground. Archer adjusted his cufflinks and opened the door. The basement was a cavern of smoke and noise. A makeshift casino. Tables of poker, blackjack, and roulette were crowded with desperate men and women. The air smelled of sweat and panic. Archer scanned the room. He spotted her instantly. Marlo was at a high-stakes blackjack table in the far corner. She looked small against the backdrop of heavy smokers and drinkers. She was focused, her eyes locked on the shoe. There was a pile of chips in front of her, a large pile. Archer moved through the crowd. his presence parting the sea of gamblers. Men instinctively stepped aside, sensing the aura of pure danger radiating from him. He stopped 10 feet from the table. He needed to see this. "Hit me," Marlowe said. Her voice was steady. The dealer, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, hesitated. "You're sitting on 19, sweetheart." "Hit me." The dealer flipped a card. "A 2. 21, Marlowe said, her face blank. "The pit boss, a man Archer recognized as Snake, verify, a lieutenant for the Vipers, stepped out from the shadows." He placed a hand on Marlowe's shoulder. It wasn't a friendly gesture. "You've had a run of luck tonight, girlie," Snake hissed. "Maybe it's time to cash out. In the back office." Marlowe froze. She knew what that meant. The back office was where they broke the fingers. "I'll cash out here," Marlowe said, trying to stand. Snake pushed her back down. "I insist." Marlowe's hand drifted to her pocket. Archer knew she had nothing in there but a bus pass. She was going to die here. Tonight. Over a debt he could pay with the loose change in his car. The realization made him furious. Not because she was in danger, but because she hadn't asked him for help. She chose this filth over him. Archer stepped into the light. "Let her go, Snake." The silence that fell over the room was instant. The music seemed to stop. Every head turned. Snake's eyes widened. He recognized the suit. He recognized the face. "Fairborn!" Snake spat, though his hand trembled slightly on Marlowe's shoulder. "This is Viper territory. You're violating the truce." "I'm here for my property," Archer lied smoothly. His eyes locked onto Marlowe's shocked face. "My maid seems to have gotten lost." "She's cleaning us out," Snake sneered. "She's a cheat." "She's a mathematician," Archer corrected. "There's a difference. And she's leaving with me." Snake pulled a knife, a serrated combat blade. "She owes us, and you're on the wrong side of town, Archer. You're alone." Archer smiled. It was a terrifying sight. "I'm never alone." Before Snake could process the threat, the lights in the basement cut out. Pitch-black darkness engulfed the room. Marlowe screamed. Archer moved by sound. He heard the swish of the knife, the grunt of exertion. He sidestepped, grabbed Snake's wrist in the dark, and twisted until he heard the wet snap of bone. Snake howled. Archer grabbed Marlowe's arm in the blindness. "Move!" "Mr. Fairborn?" she gasped. "Shut up and run!" He dragged her through the chaos of the panic-stricken crowd, using his memory of the room's layout. They burst out the back exit into the alleyway, the cool air hitting them like a slap. Marlowe stumbled, falling against his chest. She was shaking violently now. Archer held her up, his hands gripping her arms tightly. He looked down at her. Her beanie was gone, her hair wild. She looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "You," she stammered. "You came." "Get in the car," Archer growled, shoving her toward the Wraith. "But the money, I left the chips." Archer spun on her, pinning her against the side of the luxury car. His face was inches from hers. "Forget the money," he roared, losing his composure for the first time in a decade. "Who is it? Who do you owe, Marlowe?" Marlowe swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't tell you. I just started a war for you," Archer said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You will tell me." "It's not about money, Archer," she whispered, using his first name for the first time. "I'm not paying off a debt." Archer paused. "Then what are you doing?" Marlowe looked down at her hands. "I'm buying information about your brother." Archer froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. "My brother is dead," Archer said. "Lucas died 5 years ago." Marlowe looked up, a tear tracking through the grime on her cheek. "That's what you think. That's what everyone thinks. But I found him. Or rather, he found me." The sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The Vipers were regrouping inside. Archer stared at his maid, the woman he thought he owned, and realized she held the ghost of his past in her hands. "Get in the car," he said, his voice hollow. As they sped away into the night, leaving the chaos behind, Archer realized two things. First, Marlowe Drake was the most dangerous person he had ever met, and second, he was hopelessly, violently in love with her. The silence in the Wraith was heavier than the darkness outside. Archer drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift, knuckles white. Marlowe sat in the passenger seat, hugging herself, staring out at the blur of streetlights. They didn't go back to the penthouse. It was compromised. If the Vipers knew Archer had broken the truce, The glass box in the sky would be the first place they'd hit. Instead, Archer took the coastal highway, driving north toward the cliffs. He pulled into the driveway of a brutalist concrete structure that looked more like a bunker than a home. It was his safe house, known only to him and his dead brother. "Get out," Archer said, his voice devoid of warmth. Inside, the house was cold, smelling of dust and sea salt. Archer didn't turn on the main lights. He moved to the kitchen, grabbed a first aid kit, and slammed it onto the stainless steel island. "Sit." Marlowe sat on a bar stool, shivering. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the jagged reality of what had just happened. She had nearly died. Archer had killed men, and the secret she had kept for 6 months was out. Archer opened the kit. He took out antiseptic and gauze. He reached for her hand, the one Snake had grabbed, and began to clean the scrapes. His touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence in his eyes. "Start talking," he said, not looking up from her hand. "And if you lie to me, Marlowe, I will leave you here and burn the world down to find him myself." Marlowe flinched as the antiseptic stung. "I met him 6 months ago, at the charity soup kitchen I volunteer at on Sundays." Archer stopped cleaning. "Lucas, at a soup kitchen?" He didn't look like a fairborn. He looked like a wreck. Bearded, scarred, limping. He called himself Luke. I didn't know who he was. I just gave him extra bread. "Lucas is dead," Archer repeated, though with less conviction. "I saw the car burn. I buried the ashes." "He survived the fire," Marlowe whispered. "But he was badly burned. He's been in hiding, Archer, running from the same people who tried to kill him. The syndicate." Archer dropped her hand and walked away, pacing the length of the kitchen. "Why didn't he come to me?" "Because he thinks you're one of them." Archer spun around. "What?" "He thinks you ordered the hit," Marlowe said, her voice trembling. "He thinks his own brother tried to assassinate him to take the throne." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Archer felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He had spent 5 years mourning Lucas, 5 years building this empire to avenge him. And all this time, Lucas thought he was the monster. "And you?" Archer asked softly. "Dangerous. You work for me. You live in my house. Do you think I tried to kill my brother?" Marlowe looked at him. She saw the man who had just walked unarmed into a den of vipers to save her. She saw the man who demanded perfection, but never raised a hand against her. "No," she said firmly. "I told him he was wrong. That's why I started counting cards. He needs money to buy a new identity, to leave the city. He wouldn't take your money because he thinks it's blood money. So I told him I'd earn it." "By gambling with your life," Archer scoffed. "By using the only skill I have that you didn't buy," Marlowe shouted, standing up. "I'm a math prodigy, Archer. I dropped out of MIT, not community college. I can count a 6-deck shoe in my sleep. I thought I could make the money, give it to him, and prove to him that I trust you. Then maybe he'd trust you too." Archer stared at her. The revelation of her intelligence didn't surprise him. He had always suspected she was overqualified. But the loyalty, the sheer, reckless loyalty she had shown to a ghost, all to clear his name, it broke something inside him. The wall he kept around his heart cracked. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He grabbed her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You foolish, brilliant girl," he murmured. "You could have died tonight." "I calculated the odds," she breathed, her heart racing as his body pressed against hers. "I had a 14% chance of getting out alone." "And with me?" 98%. Archer's eyes searched hers. The air in the kitchen shifted from cold to scorching. The danger outside, the ghost of his brother, the blood on his hands, it all faded. There was only her scent, her fear, her defiance. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was a collision, a desperate, hungry claiming. Archer kissed her like he wanted to breathe for her. Marlowe grasped his lapels, pulling him closer, melting into the heat of him. For a moment, they weren't boss and maid. They were 2 survivors clinging to each other in the wreckage. Archer broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "We're going to find him," he vowed. "We're going to find Lucas, and then I'm going to kill whoever put that lie in his head." "The information," Marlowe gasped, trying to ground herself. "The buy-in at the Iron Horse, It wasn't just for money. It was for a location. A meeting. Lucas is meeting a broker tomorrow night to buy a passport. Where? The Obsidian Gala. Archer pulled back, a dark smile playing on his lips. The Obsidian Gala? That's the most exclusive black market auction of the year. Invite only. Masks mandatory. Do we have an invite? Archer brushed a thumb over her swollen lip. I'm Archer Fairborn. I don't need an invite. I own the venue. He stepped back, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. Go upstairs. There's a master suite. Shower. Sleep. Tomorrow, Marlo, you stop being the maid. What do I become? Archer looked her up and down, his gaze lingering with a heat that made her knees weak. Tomorrow, you become the queen. The preparation was a war of a different kind. Archer called in a team, stylists, tailors, armorers, who arrived at the safe house at dawn. Marlo was poked, prodded, and measured. Archer watched from the doorway, arms crossed. He had selected the dress himself. It wasn't just a garment. It was a statement. When Marlo finally stepped out of the dressing room that evening, the room went silent. The dress was a deep, shimmering emerald green silk that clung to every curve before cascading to the floor in a pool of dark liquid. It was backless, exposing the terrified arch of her spine. The neckline plunged daringly, but the real detail was hidden, a thigh-high slit that concealed a sheer holster strapped to her leg, holding a small ceramic pistol. Her hair was no longer in a bun. It fell in loose, dark waves around her shoulders. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her eyes, giving her a dangerous, feline look. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked powerful. Archer walked up behind her, his reflection towering over hers. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo, tailored to perfection. He placed a velvet box on the vanity. Open it. Inside was a necklace, diamonds and emeralds arranged in a chaotic, jagged pattern. This was my mother's, Archer said quietly. She wore it when she negotiated the peace treaty of '98. It commands respect. He fastened it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her nape. Tonight, you are not Marlo Drake. You are my partner, my equal. You don't bow to anyone. You don't pour drinks. You look them in the eye, and you dare them to blink. Marlo turned to face him. I've never held a gun before, Archer. You don't need to shoot it. You just need to know it's there. I am your weapon tonight. He offered her a mask, a delicate filigreed lace creation that covered her eyes. He put on his own, a sleek, minimalist black domino mask. Ready? What are the odds? She asked, a nervous habit. Tonight, the house always wins, and we are the house. The Obsidian Gala was held in the subterranean ballroom of the Grand Hotel. It was a masquerade of the city's elite criminals. Arms dealers rubbed shoulders with corrupt senators. Drug lords danced with tech moguls. Archer and Marlo entered down the grand staircase. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room. Archer Fairborn had been a recluse lately. To see him here, with a stunning, unknown woman on his arm, was an event in itself. Keep your head up, Archer murmured, his hand warm on the small of her back. They're sharks. If you bleed, they bite. I see the broker, Marlo whispered. By the champagne tower. The man in the silver fox mask. The fox, Archer nodded. He sells identities. Let's dance our way there. He swept her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz, haunting and slow. Archer moved with surprising grace. Marlo stumbled at first, but he held her firm, guiding her, his body a solid wall against hers. Relax, he whispered in her ear. Follow my lead. Just like the math, Marlo. It's a pattern. Step, turn, step. She looked up at him. Behind the mask, his gray eyes were intense, focused solely on her. For a moment, the room fell away. You dance well for a killer, she teased, emboldened by the mask. I had expensive tutors, and I'm not just a killer, Marlo. I'm a businessman. Is there a difference? Tonight, the difference is about $10 million. He spun her, bringing her back flush against his chest. When we get to the fox, you do the talking. He knows you as the buyer. I'm just the muscle. They drifted toward the edge of the floor. The fox was watching them. Archer released her but stayed close, a looming shadow. Marlo approached the man. Mr. Fox? She said, her voice steady. I believe you have a package for a Mr. Luke. The man in the silver mask chuckled. Ah, the girl with the green notebook. You clean up nice, but the price has gone up. We agreed on 50,000, Marlowe said. That was for a passport. But I heard a rumor today. I heard Luke isn't just a vagrant. I heard he's a ghost, a royal ghost. That kind of resurrection costs extra. How much? Archer asked, stepping forward. The fox looked at Archer. He didn't recognize him behind the mask immediately, but he sensed the threat. 500,000. Cash. Tonight. Done, Archer said. The fox blinked. Who are you? Archer leaned in. I'm the bank. The fox narrowed his eyes. Meet me in the loading bay in 10 minutes. Come alone, or the deal is off. He vanished into the crowd. It's a trap, Marlowe said immediately. Of course it is. Archer adjusted his cuffs. But it's the only way to get Lucas's location. He's not selling a passport, Marlowe. He's selling Lucas. What do we do? Archer slipped a hand into his jacket, checking his weapon. We go, and we break the bank. The loading bay was damp and smelled of diesel. Archer and Marlowe stood in the center of the concrete floor. The service door rattled. Stay behind me, Archer ordered. The bay doors rolled up. The fox wasn't there. Instead, a black van was parked in the center. 6 men stood around it, holding automatic rifles, and in the middle, tied to a chair, was a man. He was gaunt. Half his face was covered in burn scars. His leg was twisted at an odd angle, but the eyes, bright, piercing gray eyes, were unmistakable. Lucas. Archer felt the air leave his lungs. Seeing him, broken but alive, was like seeing a ghost materialize. Lucas, Archer breathed. The man in the chair looked up. He squinted against the harsh overhead lights. Archer. His voice was a raspy croak. You came? I told you he would, Marlowe said, stepping out from behind Archer. Lucas's eyes widened. Marlowe, no, run! It's a... Click. The sound of a dozen safety catches disengaging echoed through the bay. From the shadows of the van, a figure emerged. He was tall, wearing a white suit that seemed impossibly clean in the dirty bay. He clapped his hands, slowly. Touching, the man said. Truly, the reunion of the Fairborn brothers. Cain and Abel, rewritten. Archer stiffened. He knew that voice. Dante, Archer growled. Dante Vesper, his former chief of strategy. The man Archer had fired 2 years ago for excessive brutality. The man he thought had left the city. Hello, boss, Dante smiled. Or should I say, former boss. You see, while you were playing house with the help, I've been busy. I found Lucas. I fed him the lies about you. I wound him up like a toy soldier. Why? Archer asked, his hand hovering near his gun. Because the syndicate needs a leader who doesn't have a conscience, Dante said. You've gone soft, Archer. You let a maid live in your house. You let a rival gang operate in your territory. You're weak. He gestured to the gunman. Kill the girl. Leave the brothers. I want them to watch each other die. No! Archer roared. He moved. It was chaos. Archer shoved Marlowe behind a stack of crates just as the bullets began to fly. He returned fire, his aim precise. 2 gunmen went down. Stay down! Archer yelled at Marlowe. He broke cover, running toward Lucas. He needed to cut him loose. Archer, behind you! Marlowe screamed. She did the one thing he told her not to do. She stood up. She pulled the ceramic pistol from her thigh holster. She didn't know how to aim, but she knew math. She knew angles. She fired at a hanging industrial hook above Dante's head. The bullet sparked against the chain. The chain snapped. A massive crate swinging from the hook plummeted, crashing between the gunman and Archer, creating a barrier of dust and debris. Go! Marlowe screamed. Archer reached Lucas. He used a knife to slash the ropes. Lucas fell into his arms. Can you walk? Archer demanded. Legs busted, Lucas gritted out. Leave me! Never again. Archer hauled his brother up, slinging Lucas's arm over his shoulder. He fired blindly into the smoke, covering their retreat. Marlowe! Archer shouted. Move to the exit! They converged at the side door. The gunmen were flanking them. Bullets chipped the concrete inches from their heads. They burst out into the alleyway. The Wraith was parked 50 yards away. Get to the car, Archer commanded. They were 10 yards away when a shot rang out. Not the rapid fire of a rifle. The singular, thunderous crack of a sniper. Archer jerked. A bloom of red exploded on his shoulder. He stumbled, dropping to one knee, the weight of Lucas pulling him down. "Archer!" Marlowe screamed. She ran to him, grabbing him. "Drive!" Archer gasped, shoving the keys into her hand. His face was gray. "Take Lucas! Go! I'm not leaving you!" "You have to." Archer looked at her, his eyes losing focus. "They want me. If you stay, we all die. Save my brother, Marlowe. That was the job. Finish the job." More footsteps in the alley. Dante's men were closing in. Marlowe looked at the car. She looked at Lucas, who was barely conscious. She looked at Archer, bleeding out on the asphalt. She made the hardest calculation of her life. If she stayed, 100% chance of death for all three. If she took Lucas, 60% chance they escaped. 0% chance Archer survived. Unless she grabbed Lucas and shoved him into the back seat of the Wraith. "Lock the doors!" she screamed at Lucas. "Marlowe, what are you doing?" Lucas rasped. Marlowe turned back to Archer, but she didn't help him up. She stood over him, shielding him with her body. She dropped the gun. She raised her hands. Dante emerged from the smoke, his gun leveled at her heart. He looked at the car speeding away, Lucas driving with his good leg, and then at the woman standing over his fallen enemy. "Interesting choice," Dante sneered, "trading the king for the pawn." Marlowe looked down at Archer, who was fighting to stay awake, reaching for her ankle. "I'm not a pawn," Marlowe said, her voice cold as ice. "I'm the queen, and I'm surrendering." "Marlowe, no," Archer whispered, darkness claiming him. Dante pistol whipped her. The world went black. Marlowe fell beside Archer. The last thing Archer saw before he passed out was his maid, his love, lying unconscious next to him as Dante's men dragged them both into the darkness of the waiting van. The Wraith was gone. Lucas was safe. But Archer and Marlowe were now in the belly of the beast. Consciousness returned to Archer in waves of throbbing pain. The smell of antiseptic and rust filled his nose. He wasn't dead. That was the first surprise. He opened his eyes. The room was stark, illuminated by a single buzzing fluorescent strip. It looked like an operating theater in a condemned hospital. He was strapped to a metal chair, his hands bound behind him with industrial zip ties. His shoulder had been bandaged, but crudely. The bullet was still inside. "You're awake!" The voice was soft, trembling but resilient. Archer whipped his head to the side. Marlowe was sitting on the floor a few feet away, her hands cuffed to a radiator pipe. Her beautiful green dress was torn at the hem, stained with grease and dust. Her cheek was bruised where Dante had struck her, but her eyes were clear. "Marlowe," Archer rasped, his throat dry as sandpaper. "Are you hurt?" "Just a headache," she lied. She shifted, grimacing. "Archer, we're in the old shipyard. Building 4. I counted the turns the van made. I timed the distance." Archer tested his bonds. They were tight. "Dante!" "He's upstairs. I heard him arguing on the phone. Something about an extraction team. He's selling you out to the Syndicate Council. He wants to present your head on a platter to prove he should be the new king." Archer laughed, a dark, jagged sound. "He always did lack imagination." He looked at her. Really looked at her. In this hellhole covered in grime, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. "You could have escaped with Lucas. You traded your life for mine. That's bad math, Marlowe." Marlowe rested her head against the cold pipe, meeting his gaze. "I ran the numbers, Archer. A life without you. The probability of happiness was 0. The confession hung in the stale air. More powerful than any weapon Archer had ever wielded. He pulled against the zip ties, ignoring the agony in his shoulder. He had to get her out. He would tear this building down with his bare hands if he had to. "We need a variable," Archer muttered, scanning the room. "Something Dante didn't account for. He didn't account for the structural integrity of this room," Marlowe said. She nodded toward the wall behind him. "Look at the stress fractures in the concrete. And the vibrations? Can you feel them?" Archer concentrated. He felt a rhythmic thrumming in the floor. "Thump, thump, thump, thump." "The generator," Archer realized. "It's directly below us. And it's old," Marlowe added. "Diesel. If the fuel line is compromised, the pressure builds. It doesn't just fail, it explodes. And how do we compromise a fuel line from inside a locked room?" Marlowe smiled, a small, dangerous smile that mirrored his own. She lifted her leg, the one with the sheer holster. The gun was gone. taken by Dante's men, but she wasn't pointing at the holster. She was pointing at her heel. She twisted her foot. The stiletto heel of her shoe clicked and detached. "I modified them," she explained, "for the casinos. Sometimes you need a tool to tamper with a shuffle machine." She slid the detached steel heel across the floor with her toe. It spun and stopped inches from Archer's chair. It was sharp, jagged steel, a shiv. "Cut yourself loose," she whispered. "Then cut me loose. Then we blow this place to hell." Archer maneuvered his chair, his fingers straining to reach the metal spike. It took 5 agonizing minutes. Sweat poured down his face. His shoulder screamed in protest. Finally, his fingers brushed the cold steel. He gripped it. He began to saw at the plastic ties. Snap. His hands were free. He was moving before the circulation even returned to his fingers. He was at Marlowe's side in a second, using the heel to pick the lock on her cuffs. It was a crude pick, but Archer Fairborn knew locks. The cuffs clicked open. Marlowe fell into his arms. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair for a brief second. "When we get out of here," he whispered, "I'm giving you a raise." "I accept," she breathed. Archer moved to the door. He pressed his ear against it. One guard outside, heavy footsteps, probably armed with a submachine gun. "The generator room is down the hall to the left," Marlowe instructed. "I saw the schematic on the wall when they dragged us in." Archer nodded. He stood by the door. "Scream!" "What?" "Scream like you're dying." Marlowe didn't hesitate. She let out a blood-curdling shriek of terror. The door burst open. A massive guard stepped in, weapon raised. "Shut up, you—" He never finished the sentence. Archer lunged from the blind spot behind the door. He drove the steel heel into the guard's neck. It was brutal, efficient, and silent. The man gargled and collapsed. Archer caught the submachine gun before it hit the floor. He checked the magazine. Full. "Let's go," Archer said, his face a mask of cold fury. They moved into the hallway. It was empty. They found the generator room. It was a roaring beast of machinery, leaking oil and fumes. "There," Marlowe pointed to the main intake valve. "If you sever that, the pressure regulator fails. We have maybe 3 minutes before critical mass." Archer raised the gun and fired a single shot. The valve shattered. Diesel sprayed into the air. The engine's hum turned into a screaming whine. "Run," Archer commanded. They sprinted toward the stairwell. Alarms began to blare. The sound of shouting echoed from the upper floors. Dante knew they were loose. They burst onto the roof, just as the floor beneath them shuddered. The explosion in the basement was deep and muffled, but the shockwave was undeniable. The building groaned. Smoke began to pour from the ventilation shafts. The roof was a flat expanse of concrete, wind-whipped and exposed. In the center, a helicopter was spooling up, its blades cutting the night air. Dante Vesper stood by the open door of the chopper, screaming at his pilot to take off. He saw them emerge from the stairwell. He raised a pistol and fired. The bullet sparked off the concrete near Marlowe's feet. Archer shoved her behind an AC unit and returned fire, forcing Dante to duck behind the fuselage. "He's leaving!" Marlowe yelled over the roar of the rotors. "No, he's not," Archer growled. The helicopter began to lift off. It rose 10 feet, 20 feet. Dante leaned out, laughing, a manic look in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought he was untouchable. Archer stood up. He stepped out from cover. He raised the submachine gun. "Archer, he's out of range for a spray," Marlowe warned. "The wind is 30 knots cross-directional." "Calculate it," Archer roared, not taking his eyes off the rising chopper. Marlowe looked at the flags, snapping on the shipyard cranes. She looked at the distance. She looked at the angle of the ascent. Her mind whirred, variables clicking into place faster than a computer. "Aim 2 feet above the rotor mast," she screamed. "Lead him by 4 degrees left." Archer didn't question her. He didn't hesitate. He adjusted his aim, trusting her math more than his own eyesight. He squeezed the trigger. He emptied the magazine in a controlled burst. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a spark. The bullets chewed through the delicate hydraulic linkage of the main rotor assembly. The helicopter screeched. It lurched violently to the right. The tail rotor clipped the edge of a crane. Dante's laughter died. The chopper spun out of control. It crashed onto the far side of the roof, sliding in a shower of sparks and screeching metal until it slammed into the concrete parapet, teetering on the edge. Silence returned save for the crackle of flames. Archer dropped the empty gun. He walked toward the wreckage. Marlowe followed him, grabbing a discarded pistol from the ground. Dante pulled himself out of the burning cabin. He was bloody, his white suit ruined. He crawled across the roof, coughing. He looked up to see Archer standing over him, the devil himself, risen from the dead. "You," Dante gasped. "You should be dead." "I have something to live for," Archer said. Dante reached for his gun, hidden in his jacket. Bang! It wasn't Archer who fired. Archer turned. Marlowe stood there, the pistol raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Her hand was steady. Her eyes were cold. She had shot Dante in the shoulder, pinning him to the ground. "That," Marlowe said, her voice trembling slightly with rage, "was for the late nights." Archer looked at her with pure awe. He looked back at Dante. "It's over, Dante. The syndicate will know you failed. You're a dead man walking." Dante spat blood. "You can't kill me, Fairborn. I know where the bodies are buried. I know about Lucas." "Lucas is safe," a new voice boomed. The roof access door slammed open again. A dozen men in tactical gear swarmed the roof. At the front, leaning on a crutch but holding a shotgun, was Lucas. "Brother," Lucas grinned, though his face was pale. "I brought the cavalry. Turns out your security team is very loyal. Once I told them the king was in trouble, they geared up." Archer let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He walked over to Lucas and gripped his shoulder. "You should be in a hospital." "And miss the party?" Lucas looked at Dante. "So, this is the usurper." Archer turned back to Marlowe. She was lowering the gun, the adrenaline finally crashing. She swayed. Archer caught her before she hit the ground. He swept her up into his arms, ignoring the pain in his own body. "Take out the trash," Archer said to his men, gesturing to Dante, "and call the cleanup crew. I want this building erased." He carried Marlowe toward the elevator, stepping over the debris. "Where are we going?" Marlowe murmured against his chest. "Home," Archer said. "And this time, we're taking the front door." 1 month later, the penthouse was quiet, but it was no longer sterile. There were books on the coffee table, books on game theory and astrophysics. There was a throw blanket on the pristine white sofa. The scent of vanilla was now a permanent fixture, mingling with the expensive leather. Archer stood by the window, looking out at his city. The power dynamic had shifted. With Dante gone and the Vipers dismantled, the syndicate had fallen in line. Lucas was recovering in the guest wing, currently managing the legal logistics of the business, but the biggest change was standing behind him. Marlowe walked into the room. She wasn't wearing a maid's uniform. She wore a tailored black suit, sharp and elegant. She held a tablet in her hand. "The board meeting is in 20 minutes, she said. "The expansion into the shipping sector shows a projected yield of 12%. Archer turned. He took the tablet from her hand and tossed it onto the sofa. "Archer," she scolded, "that's important data." "Not as important as this," he said. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He didn't kneel. Kings don't kneel. But he took her hand with a reverence that spoke volumes. "I fired the maid," he said. Marlowe raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And who's going to polish the silver?" "I hired a staff, 12 of them, because the woman who saved my life, the woman who outsmarted the Vipers, and the woman who owns my soul is too busy for housework." He opened the box. Inside was not a traditional diamond. It was a ring made of black titanium, inset with a rare, raw emerald. Unconventional, unbreakable. "Marlowe," Archer said, his voice rough with emotion. "I calculated the odds of finding someone like you. It's 1 in a billion. I'm not a gambler, but I'm going all in." Marlowe looked at the ring, then up at him. Her eyes shone with tears. "Is this a promotion, Mr. Fairborn?" "It's a merger," he corrected. "Marry me, rule with me, be the queen to this city." Marlowe smiled, and it was the brightest thing in the room. She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "The probability of me saying yes," she whispered, leaning in, "is 100%. Archer kissed her, and for the first time in his life, the silence of the penthouse didn't feel lonely. It felt complete. Outside, the city lights flickered, a chaotic sea of variables and dangers. But in here, everything was exactly as it should be. The Mafia Boss had lost his heart, but he had won the game. And that is how a simple deviation in a schedule brought down an empire and built a new one. Archer Fairborn thought he controlled everything, but he learned the hard way that love is the only variable you can't predict. From a hidden notebook to a rooftop shootout, Marlowe Drake proved that the most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one holding the gun. It's the one counting the bullets. If you enjoyed this twisty, high-stakes romance, smash that like button. Did you expect Lucas to come back? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more dark romances and thrillers coming your way. Thanks for watching. Share reading.